Hello, this is Pat O'Mara. I'm with Inveniam Capital Partners, and I'm joined by our friends at Oasis Pro. We have with us Evangelos, who's the head of ATS services, and Bob, who is the head of business management for Oasis Pro. And I'm joined by Albert Berdellans, who is a managing director of Inveniam AI, and we're talking about the reality of tokenized securities. And we're super excited to have our Oasis Pro partners and friends with us. And Evangelos, why don't we just start with some basic introductions? Tell me about yourself, brother.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Pat, and thanks for having us here. Really appreciate it. You've been a great partner through and through, and looking forward to continued collaboration with yourself and the Inveniam team. So, by way of introduction, my name is Evangelos Tzoulafis. As Pat said, I'm SVP of ATS Services here at Oasis Pro Markets. My background dates me back to the late 1990s from the standpoint of starting my career with the electronification of the public markets. So I worked for Bank of America in the discount online brokerage arm, Bank of America Investment Services, which most of you now know as Merrill Edge. Also worked for JP Morgan on the wealth management side. And then prior to joining Oasis Pro Markets in October of 2020, I worked for a company called Gain Capital for close to a decade. Gain was subsequently acquired by StoneX, but they're in the FX, CFD, and derivative space. Worked both as head of retail trading platforms and also on the project management side of the house. Yeah, really looking forward to these conversations.
And Evangelos, just for the sake of everybody who's on this call, you're SVP of ATS Services. Tell us what ATS stands for, and Oasis Pro is an ATS, and tell us why that's important.
That's right. So Oasis Pro Markets is a FINRA regulated broker dealer and an SEC registered alternative trading system. So ATS stands for Alternative Trading System. We have not only the capabilities to offer primary issuances through the regulated broker dealer, but also secondary trading through the ATS. We're primarily in the digital security space, so offering private alternative investments that are available for secondary trading through our venue.
Fantastic. Bob, thanks for joining us as well. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your history and when you joined Oasis Pro.
Sure, and thanks for inviting me on the show, guys. Really appreciate it. Yeah, I'm Bob Yospiel, head of business management at Oasis Pro Markets. I joined Oasis Pro in January of 2021 as employee number 3. We're over 20 now with about 22 offshore developers. So we're continuing to grow. Prior to joining Oasis Pro, I had spent 20 years at Credit Suisse in investment banking and capital markets, and ultimately underneath the CFO. I left there in 2011. And then I joined the Bank of America and the Royal Bank of Canada, where I helped manage fixed income trading technology. So I'm a TradFi guy who's crossed over into this digital asset space, fully recognizing the benefits of tokenized security offerings.
Hey, what a pleasure to have you on, Bob. Thanks so much. And Albert, talk to us a little bit about who you are and your role. You're our new managing director of Inveniam AI, and maybe give us 2 seconds on the Albert story and also Inveniam AI.
Thanks, Pat. Yeah, so I'm Albert Berdellans. I lead the AI division at Inveniam. Mostly our AI division is focused on helping to automate the on-ramp into digital assets and into our blockchain-based technologies. And so I'm here really to learn and ask some pretty interesting questions and benefit from the knowledge of our incredible partners at Oasis Pro.
And for the sake of full disclosure, Inveniam is a shareholder in Oasis Pro. And oh, by the way, Oasis Pro is a shareholder in Inveniam. So we did a stock swap early on, and we also did we built some technology together. So we've been working with these guys for a little bit, and we hope to do so for the next couple of decades. So with that, let's talk for a minute about the business of Oasis Pro, right? We now understand an ATS is a place on a primary or secondary basis you can be trading securities. We've been trading securities digitally for a long time. What differentiates Oasis Pro from others, right? And then specifically your Form BD and these digital securities and the use of blockchain. What is it that makes you unique? And then let's talk about what that value is going to be translated to customers.
Yeah, so I can start there. With regards to the licenses and approvals that we have, we're able to trade and settle digital securities for stablecoins. That means that you have uh, very little, if any, counterparty risk, and then also that means that the transactions are settled not in T+2, not T+1, but actually real time, as close to atomic as you can get. So that's a key differentiator with regards to our technology and the licenses that we have. But ultimately, when I think about private market investments that historically have been very illiquid, being able to offer these types of investments to mainstream investors and really enabling more portfolio diversification, I think that is a game changer. I always go back to uh, liquidity, efficiency, transparency as many of the key words that really highlight what we're all about. But the opportunity to fractionalize and make these types of investments available to a much larger audience, I think is truly of the utmost importance.
Yeah, it really is going to transform the markets when we have the ability to, on a real time basis, settle these digital securities, particularly these digital securities that represent pieces of the capital stack of both real world assets, where Bob and I are both at the Real World Asset Summit here in New York right now. And he's sitting at the opposite end of the same restaurant that I am in the hotel, as we do this podcast. And also alternatives, right? So this is not necessarily focused on public market assets as much as securities that represent private market assets. Now, it could go into public markets itself, but Bob, talk to us a little bit about your focus area. Is this public markets area markets focused, or is it private markets focused? And where do you think you're going to get that real traction?
No, we're definitely focused on the private markets. The public markets, and particularly equities markets, it's pretty efficient as it is. There's no real benefit, I don't think, to us tokenized equity offering straightforward common stock. On the private side, where you have asset-backed securities and mortgage-backed securities, for example, where there's an over-the-counter market, difficult to trade, we have a platform that allows a buyer and a seller to trade with each other via a state-of-the-art matching engine. We've also noticed, as Evangelos said earlier, in the private markets, particularly private equity funds, the big ones that we all know, KKR, Blackstone, etc. They have funds that could ultimately be tokenized, and that allows for democratization of these private assets and these private securities offerings that have typically only been available to institutional investors or wealthier investors. If a KKR healthcare fund had a $250,000 minimum investment, it eliminates 99% of the population. If you can tokenize that, fractionalize it to 5 or 10%, somebody could purchase $12,500 or $25,000 of that fund and have access to the returns that are typically exceed the public markets for these types of private market securities.
Yeah, and I think that this really gets and creates opportunities for democratization of alpha, right? Where a lot of different people are going to be able to chase alpha, or an outperformance of the broad market, by participating in sectors, even when you're not a CIO of a university, right? And so we have these private market assets, so CMBS, as you mentioned, commercial mortgage-backed securities, right, or RMBS, or these portfolios of alts, that are trading in an OTC manner that will literally trade in a digital manner. To do that, you need data, right? And Albert, I think that's your core business, right? How do we scale data to support what is typically unstructured data that's going to support this digital trading? Albert, you want to talk about that maybe just for a moment?
Yeah, I do. And then I've got a follow-up question that's related, because it's very interesting to see kind of these large institutional clients move into tokenization of private market assets. And at Inveniam, especially in our AI division, we help smooth the on-ramp for that. And that's a major area of demand, because tokenization is the future, but digitizing their data is now. And so that's a major area of concern for most people who are on that road. So I wanted to ask, I saw that, or even earlier this year, your CEO, Pat LaVecchia, said there was kind of a 10-year timeline to see large-scale institutional adoption of tokenization for private market assets. Sitting here today, how do you guys feel about that timeline? Have you seen anything change?
Well, I think 10 years can go by pretty quickly. We're in a very early stage in this ecosystem, if you will. It will take a while before all securities are available in digital or tokenized form. It will be a slower beginning. Maybe the next 2 or 3 years, there'll be institutions stepping lightly into this space. But as the ball gets rolling, as the technology becomes more perfected, as the security of the blockchain becomes stronger and tighter, I think a 10 years from now, the capital markets will look much different than they look today.
Yeah, I quickly add to that. I totally agree with Bob's sentiments. There are some, I guess, challenges the ecosystem is working through, and maybe challenges isn't the right word, but ultimately, we need some standardization. We need interoperability. We need a better user experience. I think we're all working towards that goal. Institutions, these large global institutions that are starting to look very, very deeply at digital securities and this next phase of digital assets growth, are gonna work us all towards that direction, because it does take these large organizations to help to move the needle.
When we think about the earliest days of trading of stocks in New York, they used to gather underneath the broom tree, right? And they would gather in one location and they would trade, and then they would settle their book, right? And you look at, there's a 425-year-old book that looks at the first bubble in the Amsterdam exchange, right, where you had the Dutch East Indies and people were buying and selling, shares in the ships as they return, and if you could buy a share of the hold of a ship returning from the East Indies, you could make quick money on that. And so if you knew that the ship was actually going to come, there were the ability to have notice that the ship hadn't sunk, right? And people would start rumors, and people would sell more of a hold than they actually had, and then they had to reconcile that trade. And that was the beginning of regulation, right, in Amsterdam. And when we think about speed of data in this world, it's just going, there's more and more data, yet we're still reconciling in a T+3, right, with private loans. We're in some cases we're settling T+35 or 45, excuse me. I mean, the settlement is really kind of epic, and there's entire security classes right now, whole loan settlement, that are settled in America by fax. And when that was put into law, I'm sure the people who wrote that down thought, oh, we're digitally future-proofing us by making it fax, right? Well, that was a great idea for 10 years. You know what I mean? Now at JP Morgan, there's an entire floor of fax machines that people have to monitor, and it just slows everything down as you settle this, right? And I think what we want to do is talk about the speed of the market, right? And you talked about atomic settlement, Evangelos, or as close as we can. What does this mean as we're going to get good data on the underlying assets? and we're going to have price discovery, and they're going to exist in a single location where everybody can, instead of gathering under a broom tree, they're gathering at a marketplace, right? What does that do for the markets when we achieve critical mass? And I know critical mass might take a minute, but what is the data and the speed of data and the access to data and quality data and price discovery and then the location? What is that going to do for these markets that right now are OTC? How's that going to help efficiency? How's that going to trade how they operate?
Yeah, to that point, I was heading in that direction with regards to efficiencies. Being able to pull the lever back from T plus 30 days to almost real time is a huge difference, and that also enables, I think, more product that historically maybe we weren't really thinking about. But that also leads to maybe creating very bespoke baskets. Think about how you can take a particular asset, and the way Inveniam really helps to mark that asset to more real time. Formerly, we'll take a commercial real estate building, for example. Formerly, that was being appraised once a year, maybe not even. With Inveniam and the power of your solutions, you can make that mark to market more real time. Not only does that benefit your end clients, that benefits shops like Oasis Pro Markets, who are offering venues for trading. Market dynamics are always gonna price the asset, but just like public equities, there are these reports, whether they're quarterly or monthly, that really help to drive the efficiency in the underlying asset. So private markets, historically very illiquid. Now you're able to create very specific product. And the way we saw mutual funds go from one day being a mutual fund to becoming an ETF, I think we can expect the same in this ecosystem. It's not going to happen overnight, but we'll eventually get there.
And Bob, I'm going to follow this up with a question to you on this, right? When, I have one of our shareholders, Inveniam, I used to talk about private market assets trading 24/7, 365. And he really jumped on me, one of our shareholders, and said, hey, listen, Bitcoin trading 24/7, 365 is a bug, not a feature, right? And he said, and the reason is you see in the thinner coins, right, in crypto that are trading 24/7, 365, that when the people who actually make markets take weekends off, right, the vol goes way up, and you can have all sorts of problems, particularly when you have quant strategies or algorithmic trading in there. And an AMM alone by itself doesn't do it, and so it distorts the market, right? As we think about this, are we going to see some of these things? Are they going to trade 24/7, 365 immediately? Are they going to trade by appointment? Once a month for 4 hours, once a quarter? What's that look like? Are different assets going to trade in different ways, or how do you think about this, and what are people going to see on your platform?
Well, I think the goal ultimately is kind of 24/7, 365 trading. As Evangelos mentioned earlier, the efficiency and the speed of the blockchain, eliminating counterparty risk, where you and I have a pre-verified ability to settle a trade almost instantaneously. Consider the GameStop fiasco from 2 years ago, where the DTCC couldn't clear trades and an astronomical number of trades failed on the T+3 basis. The technology that we're talking about now is just a pre-validated ability for my security against Patrick's digital currency to make a match and settle. Ultimately, that could become 365/7. But again, as we're in the early stages of this business and this ecosystem, as you mentioned earlier, Pat, maybe security will trade every Tuesday, Wednesday between noon and 4 on the private side, until momentum builds such that people have faith in the system and understand the technology and understand the benefits that they will reap from a security token.
And that security token trading, we just need to be aware that um, the even if you serve up the information and it's available, just because it's online doesn't mean somebody's going to see it, right? We got to be able to go and target and reach the people, right? And how do we deliver the information to the buyers in order to create an orderly market, right? Where we have enough buyers and sellers and it's not mismatched, et cetera. And now eventually there'll be enough data scraping systems where people will be able to see there's an ARB here and the market will become more and more efficient. But in the beginning, there's literally going to have to be a ton of us curating the growth of this so this two-sided market develops where both sides develop in tandem, right? And I'd like to just really suggest that I think data and data ubiquity, but also information and pushing that out there. And Albert, when we think about how data is going to reach the whole world, right? And we think about marketing and pushing that out and who the market makers are and the ability to maintain orderly markets. How do you think AI is going to play into that, or is AI going to play into that? How do you think automated market making? How do you think algorithmic trading is going to play into that? How's that going to work both globally, but also in domestic markets like that in the U.S.?
Yeah, I think there's really going to be two areas where AI makes a big difference. First, it's going to be a force multiplier. It's going to allow you to be in a lot more places and participate a lot more fully, a lot faster than you otherwise would be able to do. I think that might be the solution to this 24/7, 365 trading, because eventually, if you're having an AI do the trading for you anyway, the AI doesn't sleep. So it might solve that problem. It's going to take a lot for people to get to the point where they really trust an AI enough to do that. And then the second area is just in accessibility. I mean, getting people from point A to point B to point C to point D, where D is tokenization. So many entities are so far away from that. It seems like they're light years away. And actually, that's one of the things I would love to ask the Oasis Pro team. I think is one of the really interesting things about the software they provide. They kind of bridge the regulatory gap that currently exists, where the laws haven't caught up, and they provide a lot of the trust and security features that would otherwise be offered maybe by a public body or licensing agency. So I would love to hear what it's like to be a trailblazer that is nonetheless, publicly regulated and licensed in a new sector like this.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the conversations we've had and have been having are all about education. I think we're still, like many of our peers in the industry, we're still painted with the same brush. Really, crypto versus digital securities, and making that differentiation. We need to constantly highlight that and highlight the fact that there's a cap table. We clearly know who owns the asset at any given time. Again, because of the essence of what we do almost in real time. But at the end of the day, we're educating partners, prospective partners, about being compliance regulatory first. That was from day one the main driver for Oasis Pro Markets. Realizing that these guardrails need to come in place, and they're going to serve their purpose as they've done in the traditional ecosystem for years, decades. It's just part and parcel of being able to build this the right way, compliance forward.
And I want to, as we do that, and we create the secondary market for these whole new asset classes, right? That right now are OTC, and that's fine, but it's difficult. It's time consuming, and in many cases, you have to re-underwrite the entire asset and the entire trade again, versus the ability to keep with Inveniam the data always where the asset's always ready for sale. And then we have a secondary market like Oasis Pro. It seems to me that that's going to open up a ton of opportunity in collateralization and lending, right? Because I'm going to lend against an asset because I know if I accelerate and take that asset, I'm going to have a ready secondary market. Does that make sense? And I think that this goes hand in hand. Second, better data for price discovery, a secondary market. We're going to see real efficiency in collateralization and the ability to borrow against real world assets. Bob, how much of your business plan and where you go is going to be on the credit side, in packaged product? How much of it is going to be in equities, and how much is it going to be in these other kind of new investment trust units, or it might be in alts? Talk to us a little bit about what does that product mix look like on the roadmap?
Well, I think, private credit, certainly asset-backed securities, structured products, much more so than equities. I think the smart contract embedded in the security token that can do principal and interest calculations, principal and interest settlement, collateral triggers, capital calls, etc. Just speak to the efficiency of tokenized securities. As I mentioned earlier, a typical common stock, common equity that everybody seems to understand. Certainly, there will be benefits to a public company. The CFO can pretty much do his dividend or stock split from his office by pressing a button and sending the instruction through. But I think on the more complicated fixed income products, yield bearing products, that's really where the action is going to be.
And I think about that action because, boy, when there is a price efficiency, and I think all the way back to, this goes a little while ago. I think about one of the big trades in my lifetime that just sticks out in my own mind is I remember how big the ARB was when Ford did that massive dividend. You remember that when that dividend came out? I think it was 38 billion. I forget how much it was exactly, but it was this huge dividend. And the price action was not showing what it was ex dividend. You know what I mean? And the trade action in that stock ahead of that. And a lot of people, professional investors, came in and swept and just took money away from people who held those assets. You know what I mean? And I just think about that. Your smart contract, man, it's going to take that trade away. You know what I mean? It's much more equitable. I think it's a much fairer trade. And I think those complicated yield products, you're gonna get better data. It's gonna be more appropriately priced, not just ARB'd. Does that make sense? I don't know if you agree with that. I was hoping for a quick yes.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that, Pat. There's no two ways about it. And I think, again, what you were suggesting there, again, speaks to what I mentioned earlier, kind of this democratization of the capital markets, such that a smaller investor can stand up against a large institution who might be able to act more quickly if they have better information.
Evangelos, who are you seeing coming to you right now? Who's your ideal client? Who do you see today? Who do you see more coming into you? And who do you add the most value for today and tomorrow?
Yeah, so I would say the B2B is the ideal use case for Oasis Pro Markets. The way we've built out our technology stack, recognizing the power of APIs and how we can empower our partners, whether these be other large global institutions or smaller shops in across various industries, but really empowering them to connect to their traditional sort of legacy ecosystem, right? So Web 2, being able to connect to Web 3, looking at it from the standpoint of offering, Oasis as an infrastructure layer, whether they want to come and leverage a co-brand solution or a white label solution, or ultimately leverage these APIs to build digital securities trading, investing into their own ecosystem. That is what is really, really resonating with these larger size institutions, these global institutions, because they already have their proprietary platforms. Their clients are used to using these proprietary platforms, so they don't necessarily need to leverage our platforms. What they want to do is connect to our ecosystem, and we offer them the solutions to connect to our ecosystem through these channels that I mentioned earlier.
That they've been developing for years, right? Or in some case decades, right?
Yeah.
That they can offer the next generation of technology delivered into this. Albert, I'm going to throw it to you on as we think about this real value proposition of this better tech that people are delivering to their own channels, right? We talk about people allowing customization for folks who are investing in private equity funds, right? Where they're going to be able to trade out pieces of a fund that they have an interest in and they don't have another, right? Where this underlying data where you can set marks on what's in the portfolio that we can then create digital instruments to create derivatives of. And I think that that's interesting, but you're going to see all the way down to individual payments, right? Where individual payments are tokenized. And when that happens, suddenly people are going to be able to start to buy and build unique financial instruments where they're able to hedge liabilities exactly. You know what I mean? And the payments are going to be able to come out, and we're going to start to see efficiency in markets and creation. Talk to us a little bit about where we're going as we think about all of these abilities to slice and dice not only pieces of portfolios of alternatives that have historically been, deeply illiquid, but then also, payment streams, et cetera. And what do we think that's going to do to the alt market itself?
That's a book-length question, but I'm going to do the best I can with it. And then because there's a lot to say there, and then I'm going to kick it over to you because I think you've got a perfect answer for the next phase of our conversation. What I think people need to understand is that our entire financial system is built upon legacy systems, and it's going all the way back decades at some point. It all really goes back to AS400s somewhere sitting in a data center, and I think as we kind of chop through, and the other thing, as we have a new innovation, it just puts another system on top. I think one of the advantages of the technology that we're discussing today, including AI and blockchain and others, is it offers an opportunity to cut completely through all of that and reinvent it essentially from the ground up in a new and better way that offers fairly revolutionary technological features and has vast implications for how the market operates. And I think that is the revolutionary ideas that I think we can all share, and hopes for how the market might evolve. So Pat, my question for you, and this is a unique opportunity to ask this, because we're in a situation where each of us is invested in each other. So as you looked at Oasis Pro, what was the moment where you said, what Oasis is doing is really revolutionary? I'm a believer. This is going to matter a lot. And what made you? When did that moment happen? If you could tell us that story.
Well, we've known Pat LaVecchia for a while, who unfortunately couldn't join us here today, and Pat is a leader. He's got a long history in the markets. He understands the space really at a very deep level, right? I mean, he's been trading the private markets for a long time in a number of roles at large shops, and he came from that world to MakerDAO. And Maker, as an innovator, said we need a regulated entity, and they came forward and they put in a Form BD for approval that was written extremely well, right? And that Form BD that got approved, I would suggest, is unable to be approved in today's world. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to get a Form BD that they have. So they have a regulatory advantage that others don't have. And that regulatory advantage, others know that there's money to be made. They want the coverage of that regulatory structure so that they can trade inside it. And so I think the forward-looking filing that they submitted, they came out with a fabulous Form BD. And I would say a true regulatory advantage. And then they built this great team, and they brought people like, as Bob likes to refer to him, the Greek god of secondary trading, onto the team, and the whole crew that they've assembled. Man, that was a no-brainer, and we needed to be affiliated with people like this. I mean, that it's to do this, you need the ecosystem, right? You need data, you need tokenization, you need venue for trading, you need to feed reporting systems, right? And we were just one piece of that, and we needed to partner up with other good people. Bob, you've been around this for a couple of minutes. As you think about the ecosystem and what we need and who's needed in here and the partnerships that you guys are creating, you have a number of great partnerships. Talk to us about what you think it's going to take for us to just really rock it forward. You heard my answer on why we wanted to invest and partner with you guys, but maybe talk a little bit about what you think is going to be, who you're partnered with today, and what's going to be needed to really rocket us forward.
Well, look, we've established partnerships with various blockchain protocols. The partnership that we've established with Inveniam really is second to none, and we couldn't be more proud of partnering with you and your team and your fantastic team. I can't say enough about the guys at Inveniam, but that ability to provide the data and the price discovery around these private assets that doesn't exist today, I think is just going to be a huge part of the success of this ecosystem. I mean, you offer a very unique product with a great team of people with tremendous experience in this space, and I think that component, that price discovery, price validation, data validation, is a necessary component of this digital asset ecosystem that we're trying to build out right now.
Talk about custody for a minute. Talk about that's a thorny issue. It's been thorny for about 10 minutes, and it might be thorny for another 15. Right? Like this is an issue that we've done a lot with. We're working together on. What is, I don't even know if we can describe fully what good custody really looks like, right? But what are the next steps we need, and what's that going to do for user
I'll let
experience?
Evangelos. Yeah.
Go ahead, Evangelos.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll let Evangelos answer that.
Yeah, so I can comment. Oasis Pro Markets is a non-custodial ATS, in which case we do not custody the assets of those that subscribe to our platform. Ultimately, the interoperability point that I brought up earlier is an important one when it comes to a multi-custodial type solution, right? At the end of the day, we want to be able to offer optionality to those individuals, institutions that come to our platform. In order to do so, there needs to be interoperability amongst the custodians that you, Pat, may be working with, and Bob may be have selected another custodian. He's done his due diligence and he feels comfortable with XYZ custodian, and he doesn't necessarily want to change. So the lack of sort of a standardization layer there currently can I think be solved. We've been working together on such a solution. I think that's something that is important, just because especially when it comes to institutions, they've already etched out their their relationships, and to have to force them down one sort of channel will prove problematic. And I think being able to offer them status quo in a sense, if you get my drift, to be able to continue on with that relationship is important to be able to do.
And custody, I look at custody right now around most of those providers are digital custodians native to crypto, which have a whole different set of security parameters as bearer instruments than for securities per se. Now, there's also the other side, which is the cash leg of the trade, which is the digital instruments that need to trade and interplay. And I think as we get custodians who were born natively as custodians for securities, we're going to see a lot more attention paid to those needs. But I want to get here, and I'll throw it out to anybody who's on the call. Mohsen just posted this. Thanks, Mohsen, for doing this. What are the prevailing market sentiments among blockchain technology companies and traditional financial institutions regarding adoption and potential of tokenized securities? I'm gonna kick that off with Larry Fink is saying every single one of his securities is going to be tokenized in the future, right? Full stop. So that's the future. The question is how soon we get there. But I'd like to hear you guys at Oasis Pro. Any comments?
Well, again, I think earlier we spoke about kind of this 10-year time horizon. And if you want to just think about what Larry Fink said and the sheer size of BlackRock to say every single security they have is going to be tokenized. Okay, that feels more like 20 years, but it's clearly a lot of work to do with respect to the acceptance of a tokenized security platform, the belief in the blockchain, and the understanding of how the smart contracts work and the benefits.
Yeah, so efficiencies for the GP or issuer, liquidity for the LP, transparency even when you think about the regulators and what they're looking for. It, touching on just those three pillars makes tons of sense for both traditional financial services firms and those that are just making their way into the market. So it just makes sense. And at the end of the day, it's going to make dollars too when you think about the efficiency perspective for a lot of these traditional shops that can benefit from that.
And we're seeing, Albert, anything you want to add to this, buddy?
Yeah, I'd love to just break that down a little bit because the time frame, it's not like there's going to be nothing happening and then in 10 years it's all going to be securitized. Do you guys see any potential for the early adopters and first movers to get involved and maybe help write the rule book to their advantage and shape the way that the market evolves from there?
Oh, definitely. That's really a great point. I think, there's going to be, the first couple of firms that kind of jump into the pool, right? And as you said, they'll be able to write the roadmaps. They'll be able to speak to the regulators. They'll be the ones who kind of create this roadmap to success and the roadmap to the future. So I think that will give them really a first mover advantage. And ultimately, as others take the leap into this ecosystem, those first movers, I think, will have, the knowledge and kind of a subject matter expertise around how the system works.
I think that I want to use an old anecdote that I've used a couple of times, and I apologize for those who've heard it before. But Lord Cochrane, who was the first Lord of the Admiralty during Napoleon in the UK during Napoleon's time, and Napoleon was building all these barges to bring the French over into England, and they kept calling him. They called him 4 times over to the House of Commons in 2 weeks to interrogate him. Right? Are we ready? Are we ready? Are we ready? And then the 4th time he came over there, and he said, he'd given them all the answers. They just wanted to hear the answers again, right? And we're talking about the future and what it's going to look like, et cetera, et cetera. And finally, they said, they asked him another question that he'd already answered 3 times. And he said, I'm not saying that Napoleon won't invade England. I'm just saying he won't come by sea, right? And, everybody in the House of Commons laughed. And they didn't ask him any more questions. Do you know what I mean? Like, they got the joke. Do you know what I mean? And you can repeat the same answers again and again and again, and people are going to ask the same questions again and again. But until they get the joke, and they can say, okay, gotcha, right? And I think that getting the joke is when I'm able to have my money in a real estate asset, and then I literally walk in using MasterCard's network, and I go, Bing, and I pay for my latte using something that is in natively a real estate asset or is backed by commercial mortgage-backed securities and is not in a hedge fund that we call a bank account that has hedge fund like enterprise risk across a bank that most of the bank employees don't even understand the risks associated with the ability for that bank without a government standing behind it to clear and settle that trade. You know what I mean? As far as the risks on that bank account, right? And so the store of value is going to change. And as store of value changes, because there's better data, there's a place you can lend against it, and all of a sudden I can start using store of value in a whole different way, is where people who are GPs who want to build buildings, you know what I mean, where you need to build affordable housing, you need to build multifamily housing, we need single family housing, places where there are a marketplace where the efficient, the invisible hand of an efficient market begins working rather than a centralized planning, and all of a sudden that better data, and all of a sudden people are going to start to see this. And I think the joke is going to be when I can hold this real asset on my phone, and I literally am buying my latte with it, and that's when people aren't going to need it explained anymore, right? Just today you don't explain the internet to anybody, but I look at people explaining what the internet was, because for our kids and for many of the younger people, the whole concept of what the internet is so intuitive that they can't conceive a world without it. The ability to digitally trade and settle on a peer-to-peer network, any security in the world, in 20 years is going to be native. But getting there over the next 10 years is going to take a minute. And we got to get version 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 to get there. I'm sorry for kind of going that long, but Evangelos, what is it? What do you think we're going to see where people get the joke, right? What are the customers going to see on ATS that they did, your ATS, where they just go, oh, this is an experience that is driving me here. This is what I want to do. What part of the joke, what value proposition is going to drive them in your front door?
Yeah, I'll start by commenting on what you said earlier. So marketplaces have been the thing. Crowdfunding's been around for a good amount of time now, and it's picked up some steam. What hasn't been there is the liquidity. So, for example, you're investing in some of these deals. You have a 5-year, 7-year, maybe even 10-year hold period. The opportunity, if the case arises, for you to have liquidity, maybe it's an emergency and you need that money, doesn't necessarily come easy today. Being able to offer a venue to gain liquidity, I may want that 5-year hold period, but alternatively, I may have a need to get to those funds. And there may be somebody on the other side of that trade that's willing to match me at my offer there. So I think that changes the entire market, the entire marketplace and crowdfunding space, because we're bringing that opportunity to these investors.
Hey, Michael, you asked a great question. Sean, if you could put that question up for us, right? The previously mentioned speed of transaction and potential for algorithmic trading. Will communications between custodians put a ceiling on the speed of a non-custodial ATS? And a mechanism for a communications hub between custodians to validate, and we're going to either need a mechanism for whitelisting or a mechanism for approval. Otherwise, that is a ceiling on transaction speed. But Bob, I guess I'd throw that to you to get a first cut on this, or Evangelos, either one of you. How do you guys want to answer this?
Yeah, I'll take a shot at that one. I agree. The whole atomic nature of the transaction, or more real-time settlement, when there are multiple players, may not be as real-time as we had suggested earlier when you're talking about a multi-custodian solution. We realize that, but nonetheless, being able to offer the optionality out is important to a lot of these investors, primarily institutions. So there is that type of a drawback, but ultimately, I think the benefit still prevails there.
And I think there's a role for an interbroker dealer here, right? And Pat and I have talked about this a couple times, right? Where an interbroker dealer that sits in the middle, that has that customer in common with several of these other end, can play a role in instantaneous settlement. You know what I mean? That interbroker dealer maintaining a relationship on behalf of, when it has an overlap from a custodial standpoint, is going to be able to provide massive efficiencies in settlement and atomic functionality. Now, that's only when there is a multi-jurisdictional or an exemption that needs to be preserved, right? If you don't need to preserve an exemption, man, it's going to be super easy, right? The atomic settlement will be, or it's within one custodian, right? Because they know that the exemption is being preserved with the buyer, right? But I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Evangelos, a lot of these things that you guys are thinking of that will sit on your platform will have exemptions attached to them. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And to what you were saying earlier, Pat, I mean, trust, that intermediary that is a trusted party across the ecosystem. That's what's needed.
Yeah, and not necessarily a digital CSD, although, because right now the DTCC would say, oh, why can't we play that role? The idea is that we need mechanisms where there are choices for multiple interbroker dealers, right, to act in a role where they put capital at risk, not just to act as industry plumbing. We have, call it 5-6 minutes left on this podcast. Anybody has any questions, come to us real quick with these. Michael, thank you for that question. But I want to go around the horn, and Albert, I'm going to start with you. Any final comments, any final questions that you have for not only our friends at Oasis Pro, but also for the people who are watching the podcast?
Sure. So, I've been part of the team a little while now, just, briefly, and I get questions like, what exactly is Inveniam? What do you do? And the way I explain it is like this. Imagine you could wake up in the morning, and as soon as you wake up, you're already dressed, you've already eaten breakfast, you're already alert, you've had your coffee, just instantaneously, your whole morning routine is done the moment you wake up, and you're ready to take on the world. A world in which that were possible and that were the case would look very different from what it looks like now. Our schedules would be different. The products we buy would be different. Not to mention we'd have a whole chunk of free time to now do something else with. And that's what Inveniam does for the world of private assets. You're ready to go right whenever you want. And the world will look very different when that has mass adoption and when that's possible. And it's very exciting to see that Oasis Pro is allowing people to prepare for and participate in a world in which that is possible. And so it's very exciting to see the possibilities as the technological innovation catches up with adoption.
Bob, any final comments for us?
Yeah, just piggybacking a little bit off of what Albert said, for Oasis Pro Markets to be a pioneer in this space, along with our partners such as Inveniam, I think for me it's exciting. It's informative. The benefits of digital security technology, I think, is really starting to disseminate across the general population. We see a rise in central governments being interested in a CBDC, a central bank digital currency. Regulators starting to understand the benefits and trying to get their arms around how is this space? How are they going to control it? How are they going to maintain it? We've been a compliance first shop since we started. We're often have regulators reaching out to us about questions, etc., offering up subject matter expertise. So being in this position, leading the charge, it's just, exciting time. And I'm very happy to be where I am and proud to be with Oasis Pro Markets. And, as I said earlier, proud partner of Inveniam.
Awesome. Bob, thanks for joining us. Evangelos, any final comments for us?
Yeah, Pat, I would say, a rising tide lifts all boats. You have been at the forefront of bringing Oasis Pro Markets together with other peers in the industry. I think that is extremely important. If we're all just sort of sitting there in our walled gardens, the ecosystem's not going to grow. So we all need to work together to grow this ecosystem. It's a nascent space, which now with a lot more fanfare, is getting its opportunity to shine. So I think we just need to continue with that momentum going forward, and we're seeing more and more players interested in this space. So excited for more good times to come.
Yeah, I want to just thank both of you guys for being on, and Albert for helping me host this. We really are at a pivotal moment. We're at a pivotal moment because this technology move is going to create some new winners. It's going to create some new losers. But the goal is that the entire market is going to become more efficient. And there's enormous amounts of illiquid capital locked in assets, locked into segments of the economy that don't have secondary markets. And so what happens is you have a limited number of people who are going to be able to come in and participate, and think defined benefit plans, pensions, sovereign wealth funds, etc. But as we all know, the biggest market in the world is defined contributions. And defined contributions, when we can unitize these access points to the parts of the economy where you can get greater yield, that not only is it going to bring a flood of new capital into new geographies, new sectors, new segments of the economy, but also entire new areas of innovation. Because as we know, when capital flows in to new areas, you get more innovation, right? You get people creating. And as we think about Oasis Pro and Inveniam as a mechanism to further spawn the creator economy, where people are building the next generation of capital markets, but also the solutions to the societal problems that are out there. And this is really where we think Inveniam thinks capitalism and the ability to empower people to fund, finance, grow their own businesses in a more efficient manner, in a broader base. It's just good for the U.S. economy. It's good for the global economy. And boy, we're just proud to be partners with Oasis Pro and facilitating this next generation of the global economy. So with that being said, hey, we want to thank everybody who's been on this podcast, who's joined us. And guys, Evangelos, Bob, it's going to be good to be with you guys in the future as well on another one of these podcasts.
Yeah. Thank you for having us.
Thanks. Take care.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.